When the Spanish arrived in Florida in the early 1500s, the Timucua language was the most widely spoken language in the area, spoken in a wide swath of Georgia and Florida. By the time of the American Revolution, all of the Timucua speakers were either enslaved, died from disease, or had been absorbed into neighboring language groups. Today, the Timucua language only survives in manuscripts written by Franciscan missionaries who were learning the Timucua language in order to convert the locals to Christianity. In this manuscript, the left-hand columns are written in early modern Spanish, and the right-hand columns are written in Timucua using Spanish spelling conventions. We used to think that the Timucua portion of these manuscripts was written by a Franciscan missionary and self-taught linguist named Francisco Pareja, who taught himself Timucua in order to be able to convert the locals to Christianity. We assumed that he taught himself the language and then translated the Spanish into Timucua himself. However, Pareja wrote a grammatical description of Timucua, and it's pretty clear from reading that description that he didn't understand all of the things that were going on in the grammar of Timucua. So how could he have translated all of these texts into Timucua? Well, simple. He didn't. He had help from Indigenous authors. Recent work by scholars at the University of Florida and the University of California, Riverside shows compelling evidence that the Timucua portion of these texts were actually written by 2 or more native Timucua-speaking authors. One piece of evidence is that there's more than one Timucua dialect in these manuscripts. For example, Timucua had the suffix bo, which indicates that either the subject or the object of the verb is plural. Now, for some speakers, they always pronounced that bo, but other speakers had variation between pronouncing it as bo and buo, depending on context. Here's a graph showing the number of times that one writer used bo and buo in all the various sections of a manuscript. And as you can see, whoever wrote this manuscript was one of those Buo dialect speakers. He had variation throughout the entire manuscript. But here's a graph showing the number of times these 2 variations occur in sections of a much larger manuscript. Some of the sections show that variation in pronunciation, and other sections don't. It's pretty clear that some sections were written by a Bo dialect speaker, and other sections were written by a Buo dialect speaker. Another piece of evidence that there were probably native Timucua speakers writing this text is that the Timucua translations often differ pretty drastically from the Spanish text in ways that the missionaries probably wouldn't have approved of. For example, one manuscript is a confessional, which asks lots of questions of people who are going to confession. The Spanish version of this is usually pretty judgy about a lot of activities that Catholics would have considered sacrilegious, like praying to local deities and things. But the Timucua version often leaves out these judgments. For example, one passage in the Spanish reads, "When it was thundering, have you blown towards the heavens in order to stop the clouds or water with your evil prayers?" So it's basically saying, have you sinned by doing these evil prayers to your local deities? But the Timucua translates to, "When the heavens spoke, did you blow and pray to extinguish it?" It doesn't say anything about the prayers being evil. And the Timucua authors did this kind of thing a lot. They were like, why are you judging us and calling us evil? We're not going to translate that. These are just 2 of many different pieces of evidence that these authors bring together to show that there must have been native Timucua speakers working on this manuscript. So I think it's a really cool paper because it gives a voice to Indigenous authors who have kind of been silenced for centuries. It's also a really accessible paper. Pretty much anyone can read it. So I've put the reference for that in the caption if you want to go check it out yourself. If you'd like to learn more about the world's languages, give me a follow.